As many of you know, I have of recent become a proud Tesla owner, and the car impresses me beyond all my expectations. But having also been new to electric vehicles in general, I wanted to see how Tesla compared to the competition. I like doing my own first-hand research. For example, I often ring around car dealerships in the US to get a feel of what is going on in the industry, like what is happening about chip shortages, and how much extra are they overcharging for a Mustang Mach-E's. I'm not one to rely on information just because someone I may consider an authoritative on a matter says so. I think it's great they point me in the right direction, but I want to see the information for myself, especially when it comes to investing. Like people who say the Chinese EVs will flood the US market with cheap EVs. I want them to tell me how and show me real evidence, especially if it's going to make people start investing in XPeng or some other Chinese EV company. Now, where I live, there are limited options as to what is available in the way of EVs. But for my first comparison, I went to Mercedes. So I thought we could research what Mercedes are doing in the way of EVs. At my car dealership, they had an EQA and an EQC, of which both were out at the time, with potential customers getting to experience them. In fact, I had to put my name and number down to arrange an appointment for a time to come and test drive the cars. I did, however, speak to the salesperson for a while and try and gather as much information as I could, not about the cars so much, but more about the way the market is reacting. It would seem that Mercedes, at least where I live, have no problem selling these electric cars. The salesperson told me how much she used to love Mercedes AMG series and the noise and the power of the V8s, but now she's experienced electric, she prefers electric on a whole other level. She's also sold quite a few of them already. Now, the EQC comes in at about US $15,000 more than the Model Y, and obviously has less performance and range, yet with a larger battery, at 220 miles on an 80 kilowatt-hour battery, compared to 318 miles with a 75 kilowatt-hour battery for the Model Y. Obviously, that is a huge discrepancy. But we know that Tesla are ahead of everyone when it comes to battery efficiency. Tesla will always get the most range and performance for the money, even when the competitors sell their vehicles at a loss. And this is Mercedes, a company very good at making high-quality vehicles with exceptional engineers. Anyway, it is what it is. We know this. And possibly that within time, this kind of range will be acceptable when charging is ubiquitous. And as they research further, they can improve their range. Like I say, no one is competing with Tesla, but Mercedes need to compete with their own ICE vehicles in the meantime, before they lose their customers to Tesla. Now, it could be argued that Mercedes are beating Tesla on luxury, except that their cars come with smaller screens compared to Tesla. These days, screen size does feel like a large part of what luxury should offer. Perhaps they'll learn and get the balance right, unlike they did on the EQS. I feel like the widescreen iPad control center is an imperative element to any electric vehicle. But some consumers really want Mercedes and are willing to forego longer ranges in order to stick with their loyal brand. The 0-60 time is still 4.6 seconds, which is good for a Mercedes SUV. They have to realise though that their aim is to cannibalise their own products and not compete with Tesla. They have to differentiate themselves from Tesla and stick to what it is their existing customers love, just like how Apple cannibalised their iPod with iPhone. If they didn't, then someone else would. You didn't want to carry a phone and an iPod everywhere you go if others offer them both in one. But clearly Mercedes customers really want an electric Mercedes. It's a real shame I didn't get to drive one yet, as I can't wait to see how they go. There's a real demand for legacy auto EVs. I think this needs to be acknowledged more, so we can draw some inferences as to how the future of this EV industry will play out. Of course, they have their issues of expensive batteries, car dealerships and unions, and the fact that they make a loss on every vehicle despite how much more they sell them for than Tesla. If they can produce cheaper batteries, remove dealers and unions, then they could make a profit. Of course, with their future battery technology, their ranges should be approaching close to 300 miles, hopefully. On the other hand, 220 miles really is quite a long way to go from. Perhaps 250 miles might be closer, which for specifications would place it closer to a standard Model Y rather than a long range, which makes it that much more expensive relative to a Tesla. But Mercedes are already at this price point. So like I say, Mercedes are competing against themselves for the equivalent ICE SUV that Mercedes offer, perhaps the AMG equivalent even. Right, the GLC AMG is about the same size and is $75,000 and has the same 0-60 time as the EQC, and the AMG costs a lot more to run in fuel and servicing. So my point is, don't compare the price and specs of Mercedes EQC with a Model Y, compare them to the equivalent Mercedes. Mercedes have established a brand their customers are willing to pay a certain price point for. Where I live, they didn't have the Mercedes EQS yet, but were expecting it in soon, and supposedly have had a lot of interest already. I'd love to try that car out. I'm sure it will be incredibly luxurious, and supposedly hitting over 400 miles of range too, and I think at around $120,000. It's not a great looking car. I think Mercedes could have done better, at least on the exterior, especially compared to the concept versions they showed. But they should know the luxury car market better than Tesla. This car is competing heavily against the Mercedes S-Class range. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is enough to stop any of these companies going bankrupt. Of course, they can't make enough of these cars, they can't make them at a profit, and they can't easily remove their ICE business, which will soon turn into a liability. I think we need to look at these brands more like a phoenix. They could go bankrupt, then out of the ashes might come some EV business that has a market. They don't have to beat Tesla, they don't have to be as good as Tesla. Tesla can't make enough cars for their own customers as it is. But like I say, legacy autos don't make any profit selling these cars, so they all have to be relying on the value of their brands. And obviously, Mercedes can get away with higher priced vehicles than, say, Volkswagen. Consumers will pay more for that brand. Of course, Mercedes have to have high quality vehicles, which in turn costs more too. Remember, they're competing at Mercedes price points, offering similar features, quality and performance, but factor in too the running costs, no fuel. A Mercedes of equal performance uses a V8, which might previously have put people off even, not to mention no servicing. It is not cheap to service some versions of Mercedes. But Mercedes might be a brand that will survive the EV transition. Remember, I said brand, not company. They're spending almost an insane $50 billion in EVs, with ambitions to be all electric by the end of 2030, and plan on building 8 battery factories with capacity of 200 gigawatt hours a year, which might be enough for nearly 3 million electric Mercedes a year. I'm getting my head around this more. They need to replace their ICE business with electric, obviously, but they can only ramp up so fast. The market and competition may not wait for them to get there, but Tesla is really going to be the only competition. A Mercedes customer is not looking for a budget Chinese car. They identify with owning a Mercedes. They appreciate refined luxury and heritage along with prestige and class. Oh, and they need to make these cars at a profit. I'm hearing that Legacy may be paying around $250 a kilowatt hour for batteries, and it sounds like they have targets to get down to $100 per kilowatt hour. If a Mercedes is using 70 kilowatt hours, then that is over a $10,000 saving, which likely could put them at a profit. But the current model range they offer, they're not going to replace it all in time. Perhaps they can pick up to 10 of their best-selling types of vehicle and refine them into some great electric vehicles and just concentrate on refining these handful of vehicles. They seem to have got the message, and once they have electric vehicles up and running with enough supply of batteries, then it would come down to cutting costs. They may take on Tesla's manufacturing techniques like die-cast molds, at least within time, but it's possible that the market might support Mercedes through the whole transition, judging by what we're seeing from Rivian and Lucid's market valuations, even the likes of Neos or Xpungs too. If the market believes Mercedes can make the transition and perhaps become an upmarket EV company, or perhaps the upmarket EV company, then they may be willing to put $200 billion valuation on it. Sound absurd? Imagine if Mercedes make $10,000 per vehicle gross profit. If they can sell $2 million a year, then that's $30 billion gross profit. Remind me again how Rivian justified their valuation? There is, however, the little issue of FSD, of course, and I believe Elon when he says just about everyone will have to have it. I only have autopilot in my Tesla, and I already think this is amazing. If there was full FSD, no doubt I'd use that just about all the time. But this is easily solved by Mercedes adopting Tesla's FSD and charging network too, of course. Anyway, I thought that was interesting, and it just may not be RIP all legacy autos, or at least it's perhaps too early to tell just yet. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.